Welcome back again to the Chasing Tone podcast. I am Brian Wampler, and today, again, I have Blake Wyland of the Tone Mob podcast. And today we talk about how to break into the music business in 2016. So let's jump right into that. Hello, Blake.
Brian, it's so nice to talk to you again.
It is. It is nice to talk to me, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It's a treat.
Yeah.
It's a treat for me, in particular, just because, you know, when I start talking about fuzz circuits, my wife's eyes glaze over. It's like she don't care.
Well, I tend to have that effect on women, so, it's like, I can't really tell if it's just me or if it's the topic. I just wore my wife down. She's like, I'll marry you if you just stop talking. How about that?
I'll take one for the team, basically. Well, it's a good thing we have each other.
That is true.
Because who else would put up with my nonsense except for you?
Well, that's a good point. Your wife must be a saint.
Oh,
so
very much so.
So I have a thought for you today.
A thought? Okay, you usually have lots of thoughts, so I'll take this one.
Lots of thoughts, but this one pertains to music.
Oh, okay. I like music.
So last week we talked about where music is heading, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this week I want kind of carrying along the musical theme.
Right.
So if you're an artist now, it's 2016 right now, but if you're an artist now, how are you going to quote unquote break into the music business?
Oh, interesting.
Because it's totally different than it once was, and probably completely different than what most people think.
Right. I mean, there is still the kind of established routes of, getting discovered and quote unquote all that stuff, but I think that just doesn't. I'm not an expert on this subject because that was never a goal of mine or something I was trying to achieve, but in my mind, you would approach it much like any other sort of business. I mean, whether artists sometimes don't like to look at it this way, but the music that you create is a product. So you have to get that product, out to people. And if you want to sell that product, you got to find your customers. So it's almost like just like you would be trying to start any other consumer product business in my mind.
Right. So basically your music is a product. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even though it's a digital product, for all intents and purposes, it's a digital product.
It is.
So as such, I mean, and I'm not Taylor Swift or anything like that, so I can't tell you like step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how you do it. But I have talked to a lot of people that have done it and asked them questions, and me being a fan of nerdy stuff like this, anyways, like I like to really watch how people start their businesses and do their business, Mm-hmm. And so I really look at like music as much as it's an art form, it's also a business.
If you want to continue to do it, basically.
Right, because without the business side, it's just a hobby. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I actually equate that the same way with pedals. I mean, it's one thing to build some pedals and make some cash on eBay or Reverb. You know what I mean? That's one thing. It's a whole other thing to make a business out of it, where you know what I mean, like you have employees, or at least it's your full-time income.
Right. Yeah, it's a completely different ballgame.
Totally different. And I think music is kind of the same. Not even kind of. I think music is the same way, especially these days.
Well, I think it even comes down to there's so much that's similar. Even with like branding, like people don't like to think of it this way. For some reason, artists have sometimes a hesitation to think of things in branding or consumer products terms. But like if you're in a death metal band, unless you're doing it ironically or for some other purpose, you're not going to have like pink bunnies as your logo. So
not, you wouldn't think so. One
I
wouldn't
mean,
think
it
so.
it can work, but you know what I mean. You have to do it with purpose, basically.
Right.
If you're gonna be the Pink Money death metal band, then you have to kind of embrace that, I
Right.
guess.
Yep. So I was thinking, when I was younger and I was, let's say, 19, 18, 19-ish or so, I was in a band. I was, we talked about this before, I barely graduated high school, so I wasn't in college. But I was working, I went through so many jobs. Like literally, I counted one time in like my early 20s, probably about 20. I counted, and by that time I had had like 40 jobs. I was still
Whoa.
thinking it's maybe 21. Yeah, I had like I'd work at a warehouse for a couple weeks, and then I'd work different construction jobs, or I would work a factory of some sort. Like I just was all over the place trying to figure out me. You know what I mean? And each time, like every time, this is really going to paint a bad picture of me, but it's honest. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm somebody who I'm not. So to those who I offend, I'm sorry, but this is really me. So like I would work this job, whatever it was, for a couple weeks, and then I would get so depressed because I was like, I am just trading my time for dollars. And so I was like, I really want to be a musician. I really want to get paid to play music. That's what I love to do. And so I would get so depressed. I would just be like, I'm just quitting, and I'm going to just focus on the band. I'm just going to focus on the band. We're going to write more. We're going to try to play out more. Somebody's going to find us. I just feel it. Somebody's going to find us somewhere. This buddy will know this other guy who knows this other person who has a cousin that has a friend that once dated someone that knew someone in the music business. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and that was my real thought. Keep in mind, this is like 1994 or something, so it's forever ago.
Well, and at that time, that was probably more common for that to happen.
It was,
Yeah.
because at least here, at least in the part of USA I'm in, Indiana, like the internet wasn't, like no one had the internet. I mean, I know it was technically available, but of course it wasn't like what it is now. And I mean, we just weren't connected to it. So I didn't have any other way to look up information about how to do it. And I didn't know anyone in the business I could ask at all, So I was just stumbling my way through it, and from what I'd read in magazines, people play music in bars, and there's some A&R guy who stumbles in after work and likes you, and he signs you.
That's how it works, right?
That's how I honestly thought that. So here's this naive guy in the middle of Indiana, like a town of 1,000 people. We're allowed to even play in bars. We're not, because in Indiana you can't. Some places you can be under 21 and play, but in Indiana you can't. You can't step foot in a bar if you're under 21.
Okay.
So we couldn't play in any bars. There were no what do they call them? Clubs for teens. Like where bands come.
Right.
Don't know
Just
if you guys
all
have
ages
those.
venues. Yeah.
All ages, yeah. There really wasn't anything like that here. Which basically meant that we played some backyard parties, to groups of 5 to 10 people. Every now and then someone would, we'd hear someone looking for a band. We'd be like, hey, we'll play your party for free,
Right. For exposure.
for exposure.
Yeah.
And, and we were so bad. We were terrible. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I wish I could. I need to try to dig up some old cassette tapes with us playing, because it's pretty humiliating. But that's not the point. We were having a heck of a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. But that I was still. So we'd play this band. We'd play in this band. I'd focus completely until I ran out of money. Then I'm like, crap. I gotta get a job, man. So it was just this repetitive cycle that kept going over and over and over and over. And fast forward many years, and I finally got my head out of my butt. But that's how I thought. That's how you get famous. Not famous, but that's how you make money. Playing music.
Right.
but and I was telling, a younger kid, who was it? Someone Snapchatted me the other day, and I was talking to him about breaking into the business. And I was explaining, it's you have to look at it a lot like you would look at internet marketing. Now that doesn't mean like start some spammy sales page, and you know what I mean? And
No, right.
yeah, dear consumer, have you been looking for music? I know you have. You've come to the right place. Like
I have
let me
the
make a
music
bullet
that
list of items. Yeah, let me make a bullet list of items of what you'll get by downloading my music for the low price of $99.95.
Yeah.
And I'll
Not
throw
that.
in these hits too. So, but yeah, I mean, it's stuff that we talk about here and there on these podcasts, which is growing a base of people that like your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think creating a website is definitely one of them. Being present in all types of social media and learning how to leverage that social media for your product, which is your music, is
Mm-hmm.
another one of them. So that means, for example, if you have a Facebook page and it's your band page, I probably would not make every picture something of like, don't make every picture of you guys playing on stage. That's going to be boring like, that's not really giving anybody any value.
Right. Or insight or anything.
Yeah, but no way. I mean, that's just a picture of you. I mean, and I see that a lot, and I think if a person is looking to, make more of a name in business or not business, make more of a name in music and turn it into something that they're able to make a living at, you got to look at it like a business. And so that means you got to learn some of the skills that you may not have outside of playing music.
Right, exactly. I mean, in a lot of bands, when they get to a certain point, they have a business manager. And sometimes it makes sense if like nobody in the band gets it. But sometimes I hear about this and I kind of sit back and go, well, that seems weird. Like the drummer could handle that if he, spent a little bit of time learning about this stuff. It's not rocket surgery, you know. But I understand it's just kind of the traditional way things are done.
Right.
Too in some ways. But I agree. Like I'm always kind of thinking about like how to engage people in an interesting way. Yeah, I put up a lot of pictures of guitars and stuff because that's what people want to see. But I also, I think if I was in a band and I had some social media stuff and you want to talk about that thing that we always bring up is bringing value to people.
Right.
Like run a contest for people and randomly pick a fan and write a song about them.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Oh, things like that. Like people would get a kick out of that. You could even do that, once a month.
Right.
Or something.
Yep.
That kind of stuff is interesting and especially like, think about that fan. Maybe you had a casual fan who kind of liked your music and then they won and you wrote a song about them. That person just became a super fan.
Exactly. That's a great idea. That's a very good idea.
I just don't know why you don't see that kind of stuff very often. And there's a whole, array of things you could do that are very similar to that.
Yes, that's just one idea out of a million that haven't been done, And I think it all goes back to, as musicians, I mean, we're not really thinking that way. Most of us aren't really thinking along those lines, We're thinking we need to write music and play music out.
And that
is true.
That doesn't mean you don't
Right.
do that.
Yeah, that's a part of the puzzle. There's just many more pieces that need to be inserted in there as well. That way you can play to more and more people. And more people will identify with you and want to come see you, want to support you.
And another thing to note, like this horse has been beaten to death in recent years, but you don't make nearly as much money even if you sell, several 100,000 albums. You make good money, but it's not forever. Like the money is made these days usually on tour, at the venue, selling t-shirts, selling records, whatever the venue pays, all that stuff. That's the other thing is, so you got to, if you're going to dedicate to music, you got to kind of understand that it's really difficult to just put out a record and make money.
Right. Yeah.
Even if you have huge fan base, it's just really
And
tough.
even if you're like recording it yourself, producing it yourself, getting it like you're paying for everything, you're out of pocket. I mean, there's still not nearly the amount of money in it that one might think after all said and done. It's just
No,
I mean,
no, it sounds like a lot sometimes.
right.
But when you break it down to each member, it's just like,
Right.
okay, well, you just got paid less than minimum
Right.
wage.
Yeah, because once you spread over the time it took to do all that, yeah, of course. But I mean, and this also doesn't take into account to the Justin Biebers of the world who, got a song on YouTube and then someone famous took them under their wing, someone famous and with money, rather.
Well, yeah, there's that. And I mean but think of that about that. People like to point to him, and a lot of people try to replicate that by just putting a YouTube video
Yeah.
out there. And maybe they're extremely talented, but at the same time, that happened one
Right.
time.
Yeah.
So
And out of
versus how many
go ahead, we're going the same
Millions.
places. And how many people are trying to
ha-
be that, or trying to do that, So that's like 0.0001% or whatever.
Exactly. Or the odds are not good. That is actually, you know what? That's kind of funny. That is the modern day equivalent of just traveling around and playing in bars and hoping that somebody's going to just
It is.
It's like the modern
That's
day
a good
version.
insight. Yes. Yes. Putting a YouTube video of you out there cranking your song out on an acoustic guitar or whatever. Yeah. Definitely.
Or SoundCloud. That's the other big
SoundCloud.
one. Hit my mixtape, fam.
Yep.
Yeah. My mixtape. It's fire, yo. Hit it, fam.
It's you kids and your crazy lingo.
I seen a really funny Halloween meme about that, and it said it looked like a Kit Kat bar, like a mini one, and it said, "For Halloween, I ain't handing out candy. I'm handing out my mixtape," and the end was popped off, and it was a thumb drive.
Perfect. Perfect.
But really, I mean, actually, it's we're joking about it, but that is very similar. That's people just putting it out there and hoping somebody big hears it.
Yep.
And that's why people are just giving their mixtape out all over the place, because they want, they're hoping, I mean, it's usually a hip hop artist that's doing that, but they're hoping that Jay-Z gets it somehow and is like, this guy is got it.
Right.
I got to call him.
Right. Hey, Drake, you got to listen to this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. This tape's fire, yo.
I was Halloweening with my kids, and this guy gave me
That's
a
right.
thumb drive. Or a USB drive. It's awesome.
Here you go, Drake. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's so much truth to
But
that.
and to be fair, there is something to be said for putting stuff out there,
Definitely.
for people to find. That you still do have to do that. I'm not trying to say that that's a bad
Right.
thing. It's just expecting, doing that and expecting, build it and they will come. We both know it doesn't work in business, and I don't
No.
think it usually works in music anymore.
Not
either.
unless you're the 0.001 or whatever, in other words, not unless you're just lucky. There's only one Peyton Manning. Well, actually, there's two Mannings, and they're both pretty good. So that doesn't happen very often. Most kids are wanting to play football, and they're good in high school, and they may get into college and play some football, and maybe if they're lucky, they may have a chance on an NFL team somewhere. But they're probably not going to be Peyton Manning. You know what I mean?
Probably not.
So, but
How many LeBron James are there,
exactly. Yeah.
One.
Yeah. I mean, that's, same thing. But I'm trying to remember my point here. Where's it going with this? I totally am thinking, wait a minute, is LeBron James basketball or football? that's
boxing. He's a boxer.
Yeah. He's at MMA. I forgot. I totally forgot where I
he'd be
was
a-
going with that. I had a point around there
He'd
somewhere.
be a terrifying boxer. I wouldn't want to box LeBron James. Look at that reach.
Oh, I know where I was going with it. Okay. So, wow. So I guess really what we're talking about is for the guy that isn't, or the person that's into music, and not necessarily trying to be, you know, super ultra famous, quote unquote, but wants to make a living playing music. You know, I think that's.
Right. And I think that's most people
I think so. I think so.
that play
And
music.
and I'm
Yeah.
you know from my side, you know, the pedal manufacturer side, or I mean, not just pedals, just gear manufacturing, I guess. We get a lot of people who want to be endorsed by us just because they want. It's not because they love our product. It's because they want their name on our page, thinking that someone is going to see it and it's going to give them more clout or something, I guess. You know, and I mean, the reasons of endorsement is probably another topic for a different podcast, but
Anyway.
but I mean, you know, that's the wrong way to go about it as well. I mean, but with your name being on our website, it's not going to do anything for you, really. It's really not.
No. That relationship is for a different reason, and it isn't because, you know, somebody famous visited the Wampler Pedals page and saw you, and now you're huge. That's the odds of that happening are there again. You might as well
Right.
try to be Bieber at that
Right.
point. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yep. You're exactly right. I mean,
So I guess we've done a lot of talking about what what not to do, but like I don't feel like we've totally hit on what to do. Like from ground 0. Like what would you do from ground 0 if you had a band and you had some solid tunes and you wanted to make this work?
okay. Well, I'm shooting from the hip here, so keep in mind, like, these are going to be pretty rough ideas, and they may completely suck until like next week, whenever I get some thought behind it. But
Right.
I think my first thing to do would be like the most obvious: download WordPress and make a site. You know,
Yeah.
start a mailing list, do some reading and figure out how to start a mailing list, and why someone would even want to join your mailing list. You need to read about all that type of stuff. Social media pages on every platform, and learn how to watch what people who are successful doing it, and just watch that, research that, like you've researched practicing scales or whatever. That's the first places I would start. I think a lot of it just comes down to, content and marketing and running a business. It's really hard for me to say, like, do this step, because I'm trying to not to make it vague, and I'm not sure how to not make it vague, because, if I'm playing, okay, if I'm starting a country band, or, I'm in a country band and we're trying to get out, then my page on Facebook, my Instagram page, my Snapchat, my YouTube channel, all that stuff is going to look dramatically different than if I'm praise and worship, or if I'm metal, or whatever genre, And then aside from just making music, I would also be, trying to do other things, like give people lessons, like Skype lessons or something like that. I think that's like, look at Tom Quell, for example. I think he got a lot of notoriety from a certain group of people, like a fusion crowd, because he was given a lot of lessons. But then he comes out and he makes his own music, and he sells his own music as well. So, I mean, it's niched, but he is quite well known in those circles, But he's not trying to be Brad Paisley, like that's not what he's going for, But the guy's making a good living doing what he loves. He's figured out how to do it,
Yeah. One thing I would add or say on there too is, because like being everywhere on all social media can be a challenge, especially if you're one person trying to do it. I would say, if that's too much of a challenge, I would say start where you know that your potential audience is already. For example, like there's a lot of gearheads on Instagram, which is why that's my main thing, and it's easier to do, a couple things really well rather than spread yourself too thin. So, like, I would say just really focus on where you know that your audience is already hanging out. That would be something I would say.
How do you? That's a good point. My problem with that is if I'm just starting my business of selling my country band or whatever, I'm not exactly sure who my audience is yet. Is it housewives, middle 40s, or is it younger guys? You know what I mean? Who's listening to my stuff? I don't know
true.
yet.
That's true, but I feel like most artists have some general idea of who's going to show up to their show. Because most artists who are playing a certain style of music, they, with some exceptions, as we've talked about before, they pretty much like that style of music. So their target audience might be themselves. So where do they hang out on social media already?
That's a good insight. Yep.
So that's kind of where I would go with it. Like the punk rockers, know where other punk rockers are. So go there, type of thing.
Right. Right. And,
digitally, of course.
Yeah, and there's let's take Facebook, for example. I don't know about punk, but people, if you're on Facebook looking at that type of at stuff that relates to that type of music, others are as well. So that's a good place to jump into a conversation. And here's a for instance for you. So it's been a month or two ago. We asked all of the Wampler Facebook, the Tone group on Facebook. We asked everyone, if they wanted to. We said, hey, we're looking for some new music for our YouTube videos. If you want to, if you're cool with it, if you want to, post your link here. And, we'd love to use your stuff if it's okay with you. If nothing else, we're always looking for something to listen to when we're in the shop. Because, you know what I mean? You know how you get. Just thought, I want to hear some new music. And, there was a ton of responses in those threads. So, places like, in those situations where someone's giving you the chance of putting your music out there, and I've seen other marketers do the same thing. Hey, I'm looking for new music. If you guys want to get your music out there, we'll give you full credit. That's, and some people look at that like, yeah, the old free music for exposure. You can't look at it that simplistic, you unless you can charge money for it, then go backwards. You're probably not going to be doing this stuff if you're able to charge money for it. So, you know what I mean? So therefore, exactly. You have, I hate to put it this way, but you kind of have no leverage. So you're going to have to do some things like that in order to get yourself out there.
Right, because the harsh reality is, a lot of people don't pay for music that they've never heard before.
Correct.
Even if you think about it in the old school sense of the radio, which is, one thing. Most people didn't buy an album that they hadn't already heard a song or two on the radio. Right. By the same token, most people won't buy an album or go see a band. Some people will. Don't get me wrong. Some people will. But the vast majority of people are not going to buy an album from a band whose songs they've never heard before, whether live or in, I don't know, in a YouTube video, in a music video, in a, podcast intro. Right. I don't know. Right. Some people have heard it before if they're buying it. So, yeah. And they didn't pay to hear it. Exactly.
So. And you had a good point as far as you said something along the lines of stick to a couple of mediums. Whether if you're a Facebook guy, then do that really well first. I do believe that.
Yeah, you can branch out later.
Yeah, but so here's what I totally see where you're coming from there. But here's my thought on that is, if you're doing Facebook your very best, but yet you have time to sit down and watch some TV at night, you could do more. If you really want it bad enough, you could do more. But
well, that's true.
But I'm not a good one for work-life balance. There's also some work-life balance issues that I could probably improve. I'm up at 6 and into bed at midnight. And That's pretty much
Well,
7 days a week.
yours is a little, like, we've talked about this before, but yours is a little bit different because the line between work and play at times, or work and just enjoyment, is blurrier for you than it is for a lot of people.
Yes, but okay, that's true. But I look at it very similarly if I'm an artist. You know what I mean? I mean, like, for example, here's what I mean, for example. I don't get like a gigantic amount of enjoyment, like posting Twitter updates and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's part of the stuff that has to be done. In the same way that, like, if you're playing music, there's some stuff that's not that fun. Like, I don't get a lot of enjoyment out of restringing guitars either. But it's got to be done. You know what I mean?
Or loading your
Yeah,
gear.
and it's stuff that's
Yeah.
got to be done. So, I mean, yeah, there is some blurring of it, but it's not like, it's a little different if your job is, I don't know, selling gravel or something. You know, like that's what you do at work. Well, if you have to do that 18 hours a day, you're going to be miserable. You know? But if you're talking about your music, if you're doing things that have to do with your music, then it's a little easier to turn off the Netflix and talk about your music that you're releasing to someone who might be interested. I mean, that's my opinion. Like I said, I'm a very obsessive person, so I tend to go overboard in the work area sometimes.
Right.
But teach his own. So that's my 2 cents. That's all I have to offer on it. Would you like to wrap things up in a nice, neat package, Blake?
I'm trying to think of how to like summarize the thing, but I think we've done this on a on a business related episode that we've done before. It's almost a repeat thing. It's like in my mind, it's figure out, if you don't know who your audience is, figure that out. That's the most important thing. You got to know who you're trying to get to come to your show. Actually, I should back up. First things first, make sure that your music is, I mean, this is very broad and it means different things to different people, but make sure that like your product is good. Make sure that your music that you're putting out there is good. You know, or at least you have to really believe that it's good. Don't just like go, well, I wrote 5 songs and they're whatever. You know, like
How many songs have you written in your life? 5, and here they are. Best ones ever.
yeah, exactly. Like I'm not saying that a guy can't write a good song the first time out. I've seen that happen a million times, but just believe that you have good music. Don't be lukewarm about it, because if you don't care that much about it, then neither is anybody else.
Right.
So make sure you got a solid product, and I know music is wide ranging, so that could mean anything to anybody. And then figure out who your audience is, and go where they are and engage with them and bring them value, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat,
Right.
rinse and repeat.
Right.
Consistently do cool things, add value, and put out good product, and it will have a snowball
Right.
effect. I mean,
And
that's it, but it's a grind.
Definitely.
You can't just put your music on SoundCloud and call it a
Definitely.
day.
And I think the reason, I mean, you mentioned that we're maybe repeating a little bit. I think it's because that most processes work this way, you know, and and wanting to get into music is basically a business, you know, so
Yeah, it's the music
right.
business.
So therefore, I mean, there's not like a bunch of investors lining up to invest in bands, you know, so you're not going to take venture capital money for it. More like, you know, probably not. I mean, there are a handful of people that have done that. But anyways, so that's a good summary, Blake. That's a good summary. You did well today.
Oh, thanks. Can I have my treat now? I'm so hungry. I need my treat.
Perfect.
Anyway.
That's a great one.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brian. It was an enjoyable talk. Hopefully we made sense with what we were saying, and didn't make anybody mad.
All right. Until next week. All right, so thank you so much for listening. I hope you really like these podcasts. If you have any questions or comments, please email podcast@wamplerpedals.com. That gets to me. If you want to reach Blake directly, you can email info@tonemobpodcast. Again, if you'd like to leave a review on the podcast, that really helps us. We really appreciate that. You can just go to iTunes and leave a review there. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.